Welcome to the MSDW podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at msdynamicsworld.com. And on this episode, we return to our series all about the people, process, and technology that go into the successful support of a Dynamics 365 solution. This series is sponsored by DXC Technology. It features several veteran consultants and subject matter experts from the DXC team to talk about post-go-live support, as well as all the steps that go into a successful investment in next-generation business solutions, from cloud migration to pre-project planning to project methodology. In this episode, Microsoft MVP Rick McCutcheon speaks with Russ Riley and Greg Pierce of DXC about successful pre-project planning. There's no single approach to successfully tackling challenges like product methodology, executive sponsorship, user adoption, or planning for post-go-live support, but they are all absolutely critical to a successful outcome. I'll let Rick get things started.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Rick McCutcheon. I'm a Dynamics 365 MVP on this MS Dynamics World podcast today about Dynamics 365 success. And I have two very special guests today. I have Russ Riley, a sales director, and Greg Pierce, chief cloud officer with DXC Technology. Gentlemen, would you like to introduce yourself? Russ, go first.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So Russ Riley, again, sales director, DXC Technology, with a primary focus on Microsoft cloud-based solutions.
Okay, and Greg.
Yeah, hey, Greg Pierce here, and I've been in technology for, I don't even want to say how long, probably about close to 30 years, and have been in the dynamic space, working in that arena for going on about 12.
Okay, great. Thank you, guys. So when we first talked about doing this podcast, I was, very excited about it because, there's lots of curriculum, online learning, and videos out there about how to do the technical side of Dynamics 365. Lots of places to go to get that information. Where I think we're missing a lot of information is how do you make your project successful? And, I do a lot of work with the Dynamics user group community, and when people come to our, conferences and meetings, the questions are sometimes technical when they're stuck in a certain area, but most of the questions we get from our members is how do we become more successful? So today we want to talk about, how do you get ready for a project? And maybe we can start out, from an early planning phase of things. Gentlemen, why don't you just sort of talk a little bit about how you work with your clients today to get them ready for their, first engagement with Dynamics 365?
Sure. I think that the first thing to do is to make sure that you're going to get to a level set of expectations. And the level set of expectations not only deals with what the implementation is going to look like and what the finished product is going to look like, but the work effort required from both sides. And a level set of the amount of customization that actually is realistic given the time frame and the budget that the customer has. It's way too easy in a sales cycle to kind of get to a point where you just tell the customer what they want. And I think unfortunately there are some vendors that do that. So having that conversation I think needs to be done up front, not once the contract's signed and the project manager goes in and starts talking with people internal to the company, and all of a sudden there's surprises.
Yeah, I think to dovetail on what Greg is saying there, that I find incredibly important up front, and my team's heard me say this over and over again, but to my perspective, how you sell is how you deliver is how you sell. And the reason I think that's important up front, to piggyback exactly off what Greg said, a good consulting entity will set the proper expectations of what success looks like for everyone involved in the project. So that when you do get down the process, to Greg's point, there are no surprises. The customer has to be aware of what their involvement has to be, who the stakeholders are, and quite frankly, what the amount of effort through the process, the implementation should be.
And I think those are very valid points. And I see this myself. I don't do a lot of projects anymore, but I spent 20 years doing projects. And the projects that, I would be brought into that were sort of getting off the road were, typically where somebody came in and, they had this out of the box mentality, right? We're just going to, we're going to configure it a certain way. We're going to use it. And they never really looked at, as you sort of were saying, the end game. What does this look like, and what are we replacing now? So you ended up with, here's, in my background, CRM. You ended up with a CRM program running over here, and everybody's got sort of a skunk work of Excel spreadsheets still running the business, and that tends to fail. And another good point that you made was, a lot of times you've got to find the right partner. I'm glad you guys are bringing this up, because a lot of times they'll come in and say, okay, here's what it needs to be done to implement this technology, but they never sit down with the client and say, what is the effort going to be internally? And, a lot of projects get off the rails because the client just can't keep up with the partner, and things fall out of sync. And then, we have all kinds of, problems, getting people in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, and Rick, if I could just jump in, because you just hit something there that's important. I think oftentimes we overlook the need for industry knowledge. And I just literally yesterday had a conversation with an organization where they are looking to move to a new ERP platform because of the following. They bill their customers on a subscription basis, which is key to the revenue of their company. They were sold a system that could not handle subscription-based billing and are now having to make a move and had to bring in a third party that is not integrating well. So they're having all sorts of issues with accounts receivable, doing revenue recognition. I mean, you could see the panoply of potential issues there. So industry knowledge and upfront understanding what is key to results in the implementation. Sorry, didn't mean to jump on you there.
No, that's absolutely correct, and I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of times I don't think the customer does the proper due diligence on what technology am I really getting here, and anybody can in a PowerPoint slide deck have 5 pieces of technology working together, but does anybody really have that technology working together in the real world?
Agreed.
So let's talk a little bit about the project team at the beginning. If I look at the client side, and we're trying to help a client, we have technical people, we have non-technical people, we have users. Can we talk a little bit about what you like to see in a customer team when you're coming into a project?
Well, I think one thing that's super important, everybody puts together teams and coordination from the perspective of IT and, let's say, coming from accounting. I think you need somebody who owns it, and that person has to be responsible for interfacing with the vendor. I think it's also important to have executive sponsorship, and I think there has to be multiple touch points during the project at that executive level, because too often what happens is executives only talk to each other once things have gone off the rails. And you can help prevent things from going off the rails by having that open line of communication on a regular basis. That's not to say that things still won't go off the rails, but when they do, I think the impact is lessened.
So who should own a Dynamics 365 project? Should it be the IT department, or should it be somebody from the business?
I think where we've seen some success, and not all organizations have this type of talent in-house, but in a best case scenario, we're seeing more and more what I call business analyst, someone who is a bridge between IT and the business, who has some level of acumen across the departments, if you will. So when you're able to have that type of person to be the point to ensure, number one, hitting the technology needs, the business needs, and interacting with the implementation partner, I personally have seen a lot of success with that type of individual steering from the customer's perspective.
Yeah, I've got to agree with that answer. So, again, I'm going to go back to my experience, working with the user groups. Our most successful clients, when we see them walk into a user group conference, they have IT with them, the people that are technically going to run this project and support this project. They have an administration team to do the ongoing administration, but they bring along an executive who owns it. And you're right, that executive could be an IT executive, or it could be a line of business executive. But the key is there's an executive who actually owns this project, and keep it on track, and to make sure it gets budgeted every year, because it's not just a one-time cost to implement this. There's sort of an ongoing cost and investment.
Exactly.
So when we're doing the original planning, I like to sit the client down and say, okay, here's what we have to do from our pre-project planning, and who's going to be on your team. And if I'm working with a partner, who's going to be on the partner team. Then there's a sort of, a technical group that are going to build this, and it's mostly working with the partner to do that. But there's always, or I should say, what I seem to be left off the table in a lot of these projects, who is that post-project team? Like, who's going to maintain this? And I think customers have to start thinking about change management, because as Microsoft says, this is digital transformation. We're moving a lot of things together and, taking a lot of things off sort of manual processes still. So from a post go live, I think the customer needs to start thinking about training and support, and about, other technology they're going to add on to it. So any comments about how we can get a customer ready for that phase even early on in our pre-project planning?
Well, yes, I'd like to respond to that. I think it's a wonderful question. I think you're absolutely right that most of us get involved in a project and we're weeds deep in the project, and we're not thinking about what happens when the project is closed to completion. What's the support look like? And I'm even going to back up a step further. I think part of the due diligence process when you're selecting a partner for an implementation is understanding their delivery of methodology. Are they an agile shop? What type of processes are they using? To your point about change management, incident management, the reason I think that's important, not only for the project to go live, but do they follow that same methodology post go live support? You would think that is the case, but oftentimes you will find a very different methodology to deliver support post go live. In my humble opinion, I think those should be one and the same as you go through implementation to go live and then post support.
And maybe we can talk a little bit about sort of project management, because we have these different methodologies for project management. At DXC, sort of, maybe you don't stick to one sort of type of project management, but sort of how do you guys approach the whole idea of managing a project?
Yeah, when we're looking at managing a project, we want to make sure that there's somebody in place who can own it, somebody ideally who has some industry knowledge and has worked with the various parties that are going to have to be engaged, because as we all know, a Dynamics 365 engagement isn't always just Microsoft, the vendor, and the customer. There's often ISVs, sometimes several ISVs that are connected as well. So there's a lot of moving parts that have to be tied together.
So does DXC bring in their own sort of project methodology, and do you like to lead the project from a project management perspective?
We sure do, though we understand that the customer will also have methodology, and we can incorporate some of that into ours as long as it's not too far off. What we see more often is that there's in the customer side, you're not implementing ERP. Generally, it's, I think, a 12-year cycle. So it's kind of a newness for them, and we need to help them through it.
And that's a very good point. How sophisticated is the customer, and how many times have they done this before, really sort of falls into that conversation.
I think to your point, though, we absolutely have a methodology coming out of our PMO. It's a rather lengthy one, so I don't know if we have the time to go through it right now, but there is a methodology by which we deliver through the PMO that is given to our customers at the kickoff. And to Greg's point, that's when we're layering in any potential operational efficiency the customer may have in conjunction with our methodology, if that makes any sense.
And I think that's important too, because a lot of customers won't say they don't have a project management methodology, right?
Right.
They won't bring it up. So if you give them one, at least, they may be asking you a lot of questions about it, but there's something in place. And especially, some of these longer projects, project management really plays a role in keeping it, tight and making sure we're on time and budget. And I find, from a partner perspective, when we're trying to help somebody, we're doing them a big favor or a disservice if we don't give them the full thing, right? I think they need to look at the impact and get ready. We made a good point earlier. It's, if we go to Microsoft and we look at the methodologies, it's almost like, well, we're replacing everything with Microsoft technology and everything's going to fall into place. But, many times we're dealing with, other ERP vendors, other sort of business intelligence vendors that are already in place. And we've got to, mold our applications to fit those data models.
Absolutely.
Okay, guys, so let's talk a little bit about who, on your side, during the sales process, how do you like to engage a customer, and how do you like to work with them to go through initial requirements?
So that's a great question. So one of the key elements that I find at the initiation of a sales process is that many partners, right, wrong, or indifferent, spend a great deal of time talking about what they are capable of and what they have done in the past. And, to some extent, there's nothing wrong with that. Our philosophy is very much to set the table to listen to the organization, understand from them what their key points of frustration or what their key points of success, what does that look like? How do you define it? And understand that. Once you actually then document that, by example, you can actually start to provide information that's meaningful to them and that is not so broad set. And that's where I go back to what we were talking about earlier, which is if you're tying in industry knowledge and then specifics to a customer, you can then customize. And I understand, we're talking about a large ERP set here, but each and every process, to your point just a minute ago, is somewhat customized, right? Because there are different systems we're touching. We have to understand that in the early sales cycle, so that when we're getting through the sales cycle, again, what I said up front is how we sell is how we deliver, and how we deliver is how we sell. Because if we do a good job with our process up front in the sales cycle with the customer, it will minimize the actual delivery and implementation of the project. So in our case, it's a lot of listening, tying industry knowledge, so that when we're presenting the solution, it actually fits the need of the customer, as opposed to us trying to fit the customer into a preconceived box, if you will. Hope that answers the question.
Yeah, that was great. And, as a sort of add-on to that question, here's another challenge I see a lot of times where I've got a sort of global implementation that I'm working on, and I'm working with sort of a regional partner and not somebody like DXC. Maybe we can talk a little bit about sort of the challenges when we're doing our planning, when we're looking, different time zones, different regions, different sort of accounting law, right, in each area. So if we can just talk a little bit about how, DXC can actually help with that, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, I think that DXC is not uniquely, but there's only, maybe 3 or 4 partners in the entire world who have the scale and breadth of knowledge that we do, and the scale and breadth of resources that we do globally, and able to deliver for customers that maybe have a US-based operation, but also have offices in Europe, Asia, you name it. We can handle the complexity of it, and we can handle the different localizations that would be required as well.
So to your point, and Greg's heard me say this for years since we've been working together since 1998, but it is complex. Before Greg and I had the benefit of being part of the DXC corporation and having the resources that Greg just mentioned, we were with a smaller Microsoft partner, where in point we were the lead partner on a global implementation. The key there was, back to Greg's point, when we had to deal with localization and different accounting laws that you mentioned, is that we were named by the customer as the lead partner. And what that meant is that the other partners in different parts of the world would adopt our methodology. so that everyone was on the same script as to how to deliver and implement. And I think that is key, that a customer, when you're looking at a global implementation where you may have multiple partners, you have to name one partner as the lead, and their implementation schedule should be followed by the other partners. So again, I hope between Greg and I, we answered your question.
No, that's a great point. And I think you being the lead partner, you're almost going to build a culture around the project, right? Because it's going to be your culture of project management, your culture of delivery, and your culture of support. And I think that's important because, you know what you have, and that sort of control is going to be important to make sure that this thing is, runs properly going forward. So in closing, gentlemen, how can DXC technology really help clients become successful with their Dynamics 365 implementations?
Thanks. I appreciate the question. It's a good one. And we touched on it a little bit earlier in the conversation, talking about post-go live support that knows the given customer and is assigned to that customer. So that when a customer is calling in about their needs, they're not getting someone who has to go research who they are, who you're calling, where are you from, what kind of business are you in. These are cross-functional teams that are led by a program manager. So I think it's something, A, that we take great pride in, and B, is a big differentiator for us in the market relative to post-go live support.
Okay, guys, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to working with DXC in the future on these Dynamics 365 success programs. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you as well. Appreciate it.
This has been another episode of the MSDW podcast. My thanks to our special guests, Russ Riley and Greg Pierce from DXC Technology, for speaking with us today. If you'd like to speak with our guests to learn more about Microsoft Dynamics 365 and DXC's options for post-go live support, you can reach them at 877-651-6193 or email dxceclipse@dxc.com. That's dxceclipse@dxc.com. Thanks for listening. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World, signing off.